Welcome to this episode. Have you subscribed yet? Chapter 25, The Bloody Backflow of the River, God's Vein. On the seventh day after the failure of the river god's sacrifice, the Yinshui River went completely wild. Su Wanyan stood by the riverbank, watching the ochre-red river water churning like boiling mud. All of the 19 stone coffins had somehow stood upright, resembling rows of tombstones inserted on the river surface. The friction sounds between the coffin lids and the coffin bodies rose and fell one after another, creating a teeth-grating resonance in the valley. Dark red water seeped from every crack, dyeing the river surface into a flowing carpet of blood. Wangyan! Lin Yunyang's voice came from behind, trembling more than ever before. Su Wanyan turned around and saw that her white coat was covered with red sand from the riverbed. The coffin-shaped birthmark on the back of her neck was expanding at a visible rate, with tiny scales growing on the edges, glistening in the dark red color of the river god, steely in the sunlight. What made his heart skip a beat even more was that on the inner side of Lin Yunyang's wrist, on the skin that should have been smooth, a pagoda wood birthmark identical to the one on his left ring finger was emerging. Yunyang, your hand ... double quotes. Su Wanyan reached out to hold it, but she jerked her hand away. Lin Yunyang lowered her head, staring at her wrist. The birthmark wriggled like a living thing, gradually connecting with the coffin-shaped birthmark on the back of her neck and forming half of a 1,000-hand pattern on her forearm. On the day of the river god's sacrifice, my blood dripped onto the river god, Stia, and then ... double quotes. She suddenly looked up with the reflection of the coffin group on the river surface in her eyes. Wanyan, look at how the stone coffins are arranged. Su Wanyan turned around and realized that the 19 stone coffins had formed the shape of a 1,000-hand. The 19th stone coffin in the center was like the palm, and the surrounding stone coffins spread out like fingers. In the eye sockets of the Nuo opera masks on each coffin lid, his face was reflected. Even more strangely, countless river lantern paper figures were floating on the water. These offerings, which should have been released during the Ghost Festival, were now all turning towards the coffin group. The candle flames in their eye sockets had long gone out, replaced by 2 drops of coagulated blood beads, exactly the same shape as his and Lin Yunyang's birthmarks. The river god's vein is reconstructing the sacrifice, said Chen Xiezi's voice from the direction of the paper-making shop. Su Wanyan looked back and saw the old man standing on the bluestone path, leaning on a walking stick. A faint light seeped out from under the left eye patch, which was the mark of the soul-peeping pupil of the silver bracelet. After the failure of the river god's sacrifice in 1937, stone coffins also stood up on the river surface. At that time ... double quotes, his voice suddenly choked and he struck the ground heavily with his walking stick. At that time, your mother's stone coffin was placed in the position of the palm. Su Wanyan suddenly remembered the blood-red words on the river god steel. For the twin fiends, one inherits the divine vein, one carries the fierce soul. He looked at Lin Yunyang. Her scale-like birthmark had spread to her elbow, while his pagoda wood birthmark was spreading from his ring finger to his palm. Tiny blood beads seeped from between the wood, like textures, and each drop created ripples on the water surface. The shape of the ripples was exactly the same as the arrangement of the coffin group. "Let's go and take a look," Lin Yunyang suddenly said, walking towards the river. Her skirt was getting wet from the river water. The river god's vein is summoning the twin fiends, just like it summoned Mother back then. Su Wanyan grabbed her wrist and found that her body temperature was astonishingly low, as if she had just been fished out of a stone coffin at the bottom of the river. Have you forgotten what Chen Xiaozi said? Once the human pillar of the river god's sacrifice comes into contact with the river god's vein, there'll be... Before he could finish, a huge whirlpool suddenly exploded on the river surface. The coffin lid of the 19th stone coffin burst open with a bang, revealing the empty red silk inside. Su Wanyan's temples throbbed violently. Memories of his mother being laid in the coffin in 1993 came flooding back. The hem of the red wedding dress was soaked by the river water. The silver bracelet sparked on the edge of the coffin lid, and the look in her eyes when she was on the verge of death. It wasn't his mother's look, but the coldness of the river god's vein. "Wanyan, look at the inside of the stone coffin." Lin Yunyang pointed at the nearest stone coffin. Su Wanyan followed her finger and saw a new line of small characters engraved on the inner side of the coffin lid. When the blood of the twin fiends returns, the 1,000 hands will open their eyes. The words were written with the red sand of the river god's vein, and each stroke seemed to be absorbing the surrounding light. What made him even more breathless was that the inner wall of the stone coffin was filled with baby footprints, starting from the tiny footprints in 1937 and extending to the adult footprints in 2023. All of them were his footprints. Over the years, the river god's vein has been using your blood to nourish the 1,000 hands, said Chunchiazi, who had somehow approached. He shook a piece of pagoda wood debris from his sleeve. When your mother split the soul in 1937, it was like planting a seed in the river god's vein. Now the seed has germinated, and the coffin group is its root system. He pointed at Lin Yunyang's wrist. And what's in Yunyang's body is the sacrifice soul that should have belonged to her back then, and now it's being reclaimed by the 1,000 hands. Lin Yunyang suddenly let out a muffled groan. The scale-like birthmark on the back of her neck became extremely hot and branded the pattern of the river god steely onto her skin. Su Wanyan watched helplessly as her pupils were gradually covered by a blood-red color, and his left eye suddenly went blind. This was the early warning of the symbiosis of the twin fiends. He stumbled and held onto the stone coffin. The pagoda wood birthmark on his palm fit perfectly into the eye socket of the Nuo opera mask on the coffin lid, and a flood of memories rushed into his mind. On the autumnal equinox in 1937, the conversation Chunchiazi overheard backstage at the Nuo opera troupe. Master of the opera, once the souls of the twin fiends merge, the left hand of the 1,000-hand lord can break free from the mountain god pagoda tree. Keep your voice down. Village head Lin Wanshan said that as long as Su Xunyang's child is laid in the coffin instead of Yunyang, the blood of the twin fiends can nourish both the mountain god and the river god ... So that's how it is, Su Wanyan murmured to himself. The river god's sacrifice in 1937 was not to calm the floods at all, but to activate both the mountain god pagoda tree and the river god's vein with the blood of the twin fiends, reconnecting the left and right amputated limbs of the 1,000-hand corpse god. He looked at the withering mountain god pagoda tree. The human face pattern on the tree trunk had distorted into an expression of pain. Now the river god's vein is reconstructing the sacrifice to complete what was left unfinished back then, making Mai and Yunyang's blood the offering for the 1,000 hands to open their eyes. Lin Yunyang suddenly grabbed his hand. The changes in the coffin group were reflected in her blood-red pupils. The 19th stone coffin in the center began to sink. The virtual image of the 1,000-hand corpse god emerged on the inner side of the coffin lid. Each hand was holding a stone coffin, and all the coffin lids were slowly turning towards the direction of Su Wanyan and Lin Yunyang. Even more terrifying, a dense scratching sound came from beneath the water, as if countless hands were climbing on the bottom of the stone coffins. The owners of those hands were the human pillars of all the previous coffin sinkings, including his mother, Su Xunyang. Wanyan, your birthmark ... Lin Yunyang's voice was tinged with sobs. Su Wanyan looked down and saw that his left ring finger had completely turned ligneous. The blood beads seeping from the textures gathered in the air to form the characters returned to position. On Lin Yunyang's wrist, the pagoda wood birthmark and the coffin-shaped birthmark finally merged, forming a complete 1,000-hand pattern. Under the scale-covered skin, the outline of a fishtail could be faintly seen, the final form of the river god's human pillar. Chunchiazi, when Mother was laid in the coffin, did she engrave a counter-curse on the inner side of the stone coffin? Su Wanyan suddenly remembered the engraving at the bottom of the river god Steely. When the twin fiends appear, the 1,000 hands open their eyes. Destroy the eyes and sever the hands, and Yunshen will be forever pacified. She must have known that the twin fiends would become the key to the 1,000 hands, so she set a trap with her soul. Chunchiazi's eye patch suddenly slipped off, revealing the empty eye socket beneath. The silver bracelet in the eye socket emitted a faint light. That's right. Before being laid in the coffin, Xu Henyang engraved the real incantation on the inner side of the 19th stone coffin with her fingernails. But after Lin Wanshan found out, he covered the engraving with the blood of new human pillars every year, until ... He looked at Lin Yunyang. until Yunyang's blood dripped onto the river God Steely, awakening the bottom layer incantation. The whirlpool on the river surface suddenly intensified. The 19 stone coffins began to rotate counterclockwise, forming a huge bloody ring. Su Wangyan felt a force pulling at his soul. He looked down and saw that his shadow was splitting. Half was the outline of a human, and the other half was the virtual image of the 1,000 hands. Lin Yunyang's situation was even worse. Her body became semi-transparent, and the flowing river god's vein could be seen inside her body. And those vein flows were pushing her towards the central stone coffin. "Hold my hand," Su Wangyan shouted, grabbing Lin Yunyang's wrist. The birthmarks of the two emitted a strong light the moment they made contact. The red light of the river god's vein and the golden light of the mountain god pagoda tree collided in the air, forming a dazzling barrier. The rotation of the coffin group suddenly stopped. The blood-red words left by his mother, Su Xunyang, finally appeared on the inner side of the coffin lid of the 19th stone coffin. "Cut off the fingers and destroy the eyes, and the twin fiends will perish together." So that's it. Only by destroying the eyes and fingers of the twin fiends can we stop the awakening of the 1,000 hands, Su Wangyan said, looking at his ligneous ring finger. He suddenly remembered the "destroy their eyes" that had been chiseled on the river god Stele. It's not about destroying the eyes of the 1,000 hands, but our own "I'm the left eye, and Yunyang is the right eye." Only by self-destruction can we prevent the corpse god from resurrecting. Lin Yunyang shook her head. Blood. Tears slid down her scale, covered cheeks. But Mother didn't let us die back then. She used the soul-splitting technique to keep us alive, just for ... double quotes. Her words stopped abruptly because the central stone coffin suddenly made a loud noise. The left hand of the 1,000-hand corpse. God broke through the water from the root of the mountain god pagoda tree. Each finger was wearing the coffin lid of a stone coffin at the bottom of the river, and in the eye sockets of the Nuo opera masks on the coffin lids, the overlapping figures of Su Wangyan and Lin Yunyang were reflected. "It's too late," Chang Chiezi suddenly stuffed half of a Nuo opera mask into Su Wangyan's hand. "Take Yunyang to Qian region. The tomb keepers of Luo men are waiting there. Remember, the right hand amputated limb of the 1,000 hands is hidden in the bamboo hat of the corpse driver, and the human chrysalis sacrifice in Sichu region. ... double quotes. His voice was suddenly drowned out by the sound of water. The red light of the river god's vein enveloped his whole body and turned into countless river lantern paper figures. Each paper figure pointed to the west, the direction of Qian region. Su Wangyan tightly held the mask. His ligneous finger resonated with the broken edge of the mask, and countless images flashed before his eyes. The stilted buildings in Qian region swaying in the rainy night, the sound of the bells of the corpse driver mixed with the crisp sound of a finger being cut off, and a man wearing a bamboo hat, holding a half mask identical to his, in his hand. When he opened his eyes again, he found that Lin Yunyang had fainted in his arms. The scale-like birthmark on the back of her neck was fading, replaced by a long and thin scar, exactly the same as the wound on his mother, Su Xunyang, when she was laid in the coffin. The coffin group on the river surface began to sink, and the bloody backflow gradually subsided. Only the 19th stone coffin in the center was still floating on the water. The blood-red words on the inner side of the coffin lid were particularly eye-catching in the sunset. The blood of the twin fiends, sacrificed once every 1,000 years. But this time, Su Wangyan noticed that there was an additional fingernail engraved mark next to the character's sacrifice, turning it into the blood of the twin fiends, cut off once every 1,000 years. He picked up Lin Yunyang and walked towards the village. The click sound of the stone coffins closing came from behind. When passing by the mountain god pagoda tree, the tree trunk suddenly split open, and a pagoda wood tablet fell out, exactly the secret order of Luo men that Chen Xiaozi had mentioned before. 2 lines of characters were engraved on the back of the tablet. In Shonling village in Qian region, the corpse driver cuts off a finger. In Wanyong Valley in Sichu region, the human chrysalis sacrifice returns to its position. Su Wangyan knew that the bloody backflow of the river god's vein was just the beginning. When the birthmarks of the twin fiends burned on their wrists, and the broken edge of the Nuo Opera mask vibrated in his palm, the next terrifying sacrifice related to corpse driving and human chrysalis had already kicked off in the mist of Qian region. And at this moment, Lin Yunyang lying in his arms, the pagoda wood birthmark on her wrist was echoing his, as if reminding, the fate of the twin fiends was never a choice for two people, but an inevitable cycle of the entire 1,000-hand 5-limb sacrifice network. The end of this episode. The story continues. Subscribe now.